Tom Burland, welcome to the Star Coach Show.
Hey, Meg, it's great to see you again.
It is great to be here with you. I have got to say that I've had the honor of working really closely with you for about the past 18 months. And it has been one of the bright shining stars in my life. So thank you for that. You are a delight to work with.
Well, and you are as well. As it's been, we created this with help from several other folks that are out there, but we created and collaborated in terms of what would make this successful. I'm really encouraged by what I'm hearing from my old team, that the impact is that we thought was there and we put in the business case has come through.
So now we're going to kind of shed some light on what the heck we're talking about.
Sure.
So Tom is here with me today to talk about what bringing coaching into an organization very intentionally with a plan and a structure, what that actually does for an organization. And so you have spent the past several years envisioning this and making it happen. And let's sort of start with what led you to the vision of I can change an organization by incorporating coaching into that organization.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of my favorite quotes is from Thomas Edison, and he was asked about how many times he hadn't been successful in creating a light bulb, and he said, "I haven't failed. I just found 10,000 ways that don't work." And for me, it's been a journey. And I would say years ago, when I was a sales VP at AT&T and had just gotten the position, I had no clue what I was doing. It was a real stretch, and it was one of those be careful what you wish for moments. But I got a chance to work with two really cool consultants, Jeff Gibson and Pat Lancioni from the Table Group. They came in and they were probably some of the best consultants I've ever worked with. And they taught me how to be a leader. They coached me on how to be a leader. And some of that was coaching, but not in that term, right? So, I got to see as a leader in an organization what the impact was. And then as I left AT&T and I kind of reflected on that experience, I thought about the transformation that we went through at the time. And, I actually studied it. And the two things I think that were probably the most impactful things was employee engagement and emotional commitment. Those two things are critical in any organization going through a transformation or trying to be best in class. When you start to do a little bit of research on those two topics, nobody tells you how to get there.
They just say it's needed.
It's needed. Well, I'll know when somebody's engaged when they're engaged, but I don't know how to get them there, right? And it's sort of the same thing with management. Really, people become managers because they were really good at the job that they did as an individual contributor. And we spend tons of money on training people to do a task and a job, but we spend very little money as corporations on how to develop managers. GE did a great job of it. They had it down to a science. IBM did as well. I know AT&T didn't. They didn't spend that time. And so, but anyway, as I studied that, I kind of pivoted my career, and I said, you know what? I'm really interested in helping organizations develop their talent and to start to solve for how do you get engagement and how do you get emotional commitment from people. And, I had an opportunity to work with a really bright guy. He's since passed, but Robert Racine, who was a leader in sales enablement way back in the early, 2011, 2012, when it was really starting to become a thing. But he was a great coach, and he believed in coaching. He didn't do a really good job in terms of teaching people how to be a coach, but he could show you what a good coach was.
So he role modeled exactly
He role
what.
modeled, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he also introduced me to another individual that's been very impactful in my life, Jennifer Hogland and Hogberg. And Jennifer was with a sales methodology company. But a big part of that sales methodology was teaching sales methodology, but then teaching how to coach to the methodology for managers, right? And at that point, Robert had put me in charge of developing a coaching organization or coaching team that would go out and do deal coaching. And so that was sort of our shtick. And I thought that was really that's what you have to do to create a coaching organization is you got to be the coach, right? And, along the way, I had an opportunity to meet Scott Santucci. Scott Santucci is a brilliant mind who used to work for Forrester, used to head up, one of the research divisions around sales enablement. And he and I have had I want to say argument, but good discussions, healthy discussions about coaching, right? And what that means. And he's always pushed me, never told me what the answers were. So I'm not quite sure he knew exactly what the answers were, but he knew what the good questions to ask me were. And that really started me to think about how do you best get the impact of coaching in an organization. And, I had an opportunity over the course of the last 3.5 years or last 3 years of my corporate career of working in a sales enablement organization that went through a big transformation where quote unquote coaches, which were really trainers, we needed to pivot them. And so I was looking for a way to develop them as a real coach, right? And I went back and talked to Jennifer and said, if I was to do this, what model should I use? And she's a big advocate of ICF, the International Coaching Federation. And she said, if you're going to go down that path, instead of doing, sales methodology and coaching to a sales methodology, do peer coaching and focus your people on peer coaching. And so I did some research and said, okay, what is that going to look like for an organization? What's the best thing? And I did a bunch of research on certifications because Jennifer really pushed me to be certified. And that's where I found Rob Hicks' books and started to delve into that. And I thought Rob did a great job in that. And so I got an opportunity to meet with him and talk with him. And then he introduced me to another bright light in my life, you. Who, as we started to think about this and develop it, one of the things I really got back to was Scott Santucci saying, you really shouldn't be supplanting a manager as an external coach in a sales organization. What you really should be doing is developing coaching capability within that manager. And one of my sayings that I've crafted over the last several years is people do what their managers talk about. It's really simple. If you want something done, make sure the manager's talking about it, right?
Right.
And so I thought that, to really get an impact in an organization, you needed to get the managers to evolve to be, at least have a coaching muscle to use. And so, scratching my head saying, how do we do that? And I said, well, one of the things I've always seen is we train people, we put people through training and then kick them out of training and they're on their own, right? And as we started going through the University of Texas at Dallas program.
Yeah, because I want to pause you right there for just a second, because I want people to really hear some of the things that you're saying. But first of all, you have over the years found mentors and advisors and people to work with to challenge your thought and to explore. You started with this vision that built over time because you saw the results. Also, that piece of when I first became a leader, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was a great individual contributor. So they made me a leader. And I want the audience to hear, how often does that actually happen? Is that the exact thing that's happening with the leaders that you're coaching? they want to be great leaders and haven't necessarily been given that muscle. So you, over the years, I want everybody to hear how intentional Tom was about kind of having his interest pricked about something, wanting to bring that forward, finding incredible people to bounce ideas off of, to work with. You've worked with some incredible people. And then the research and the time and the energy he put into, I want to create this. So you said you found Dr. Hicks' book. You thought that might work for you. And from that, not just you, but several people on your team enrolled in a coach certification program. That's huge. So that's where I wanted to, because you sort of went into that, but I want people to hear that you and several members of your team invested a year of your life in a coach certification program at the level 2 level. So
yeah, absolutely. And I give my team credit because they didn't do it because they were going to get a raise. They didn't do it for any other reason than they saw the vision and they believed in it. And they believed that it would make them better leaders to have coaching skills. So, I mean, that year was pretty intense. But one of the things that helped me further develop where we ended up was an essential part of that program is mentor coach, and having a mentor coach to help you improve. And I thought I was a pretty good coach, but I saw my improvement through that period of time. And I said, geez, that's really where we need to focus my folks on, is on the managers themselves. And it was a sales orientation, but on the sales managers, but it applies to any other managing organization or management organization. They need somebody not just to train them, or they don't necessarily just need to be trained. They need somebody to help them as mentors become the best coach they can be. And so that spurred it. And I started talking internally to our organization about investing further in coaching. And, we had some advocates at the executive level.
And you really have to have an advocate somewhere above, because as you said yourself, if the vision is not in the organization, if the leader doesn't believe in it, it's not going to impact the layers below.
Yeah. And I was lucky that I actually had a partner in this, was well thought of, same level as me, well thought of, sort of that insider. You always look for somebody that's got an inside track that can be whispering. And he worked with me on developing the program and the messaging around why it was important and impactful. At the same time, organizationally, we had a huge issue. This was the Great Resignation, during the time of the Great Resignation, right? So we saw our attrition zoom. It was crazy.
And attrition is so expensive for organizations.
It's huge. I mean, we were seeing, it cost, for every person we lost, was $200,000.
Ouch.
And that was a big issue. And it really, I think, was the catalyst for people needing to find a different way to invest. One of the things that I got the executive leadership in the sales organization, meaning, the GVPs, to really focus in on was participation and how many people were actually hitting their quota. And it was probably on the lower side of what I've seen in the industry and far from best in class. And I got their buy-in that was important, along with the VPs that reported into them. And then they started to see the value of where coaching could help them further develop that, because it was about not just hitting a number as an organization, and a director hitting a number or a sales manager hitting a number. It was increasing broad participation of employees so that they felt successful. And they saw coaching as a way to get there. I had a lot of advocates and a lot of help. So I can't say that I did this alone, but I do say that, the vision of how to structure it was mine.
Yeah. That
we would put managers through a 2-day seminar on coaching that was experiential. So they got a chance, and it was great working with you And Rob
I
to
have the
create.
honor of teaching it, so I love that,
Yeah,
or facilitating that along
yeah,
with you.
and it was so it was great to work on that. So it was custom
Mm-hmm.
for our organization, and it resonated with everybody. And that was the thing that, as we taught people, went through the training, and I went through every one of them. I was just excited about how excited they were to say, this is the first time I feel like as a manager I've been invested in something that was really impactful. And we overlaid that with a mentor program so that each one of the managers had a sales mentor that had gone through the ICF certification through UTD. And so they were really top-notch coaches in my perspective. And they observed them coaching their team live.
Yeah, and I'm going to pause you there for just a second so that everybody who's listening is sort of tracking where we are. So your vision, based upon all that you had done, the people that you had talked to, was we need to empower our leaders to be better coaches for their people so that they're empowered to bring their best forward. So that the coaching culture was not, let's bring thousands of outside coaches in to coach our people. No, what this whole program was about was, let's teach leaders how to use this toolbox of skills that we have as coaches. Things like being curious and using questions and being a little more into inviting rather than just giving all the time. Being able to challenge people with their questions to bring their ideas forward, because one of the things that was really stressed was that we don't want to encourage learned helplessness. We want to empower people to engage. So first of all, this coaching culture was teaching leaders how to coach. And secondly, not just giving them the skills in a 2-day training and say, go forth and do everything differently. It was what I'd love to lean into now, if it's okay, is how you created a structure within the organization, through your mentor coaches, which you just talked about. So everybody had a mentor coach and has a mentor coach to help them bring their coaching forward. So let's talk about how the mentor coaches did that. And then also how you helped with resources and tools. I mean, I think it's a whole package, Tom. And I want people to understand that it is, because how many times have we had a 2-day training that it lit us up, excited us, and then we go back to life and it sucks us in the vortex. And if we don't have anything to anchor us into the new skill, that new skill's likely to fritter away. So let's first talk about, like, how did your mentors help support? How do they help support the leaders?
So the key is, and the most impactful is observation. So they're observing the manager coaching an individual, and then they'll have a feedback session where they provide them feedback along a structure of things that are observable. So observable skills that that they would give feedback on, and try to do it in a blend of a mentor, right? And but then also use coaching to make sure that they're extracting that individual's curiosity about how to get better. And it goes back to, this was the best way I've ever seen to create engagement and emotional commitment, is to have a partner that helps you along the way and has a safe environment where, hey, listen, it's okay not to do a great job as long as you're committed to improving, right? And as long as you're open to feedback. And so that's what, and I will say that initially my mentor coaches were probably a little softer in terms of feedback than they probably should have been. But I think that they got a little bit harder, and they got a lot more credibility when people saw them coaching. And so, and when they experienced coaching by a good coach. So
And
that
I
was
would also say
that was a
that at
key.
the very beginning, everybody, it was new, everybody was vulnerable. So a softer approach in the face of a lot of vulnerability is probably, something. They were growing their skills as mentor coaches,
Yep.
and the leaders were growing their skills as coach leaders.
Mhm. Yeah. And I will say, the second piece of it is, what are the tools that we provided the managers? We had a tool that we used for salespeople to engage in conversations with their customers that, we promoted the use and monitored that use. And so we created a coaching guide that was online. They can look at it. They can, okay, if I'm in this situation, here's what I do. And so we gave them an aid to go back to and refer to that was custom made in that company's language, so they didn't have to do any translation.
So good.
We also embedded within Salesforce, which was a CRM, a coaching forum, if you will, which really was a collaborative effort between the salesperson and the manager to lock in on what those individuals' goals were. What did they believe the value was of hitting that goal? What did it mean to them? And then how are they going to go about it? What were their action items? And then reinforce with the coach that there had to be an accountability effort to keep circling back to those goals, to make sure people are on focus to go along with that and hit it. We did recordings that were made available. We also had, with your help, seminars that we would do occasionally that coaches managers could join, so that we were expanding on some concepts and we're reinforcing others.
Mm-hmm. And you supported your mentor coaches by having mentor coaching sessions for them. Yep. So it wasn't a one and done. It was an effort that started at least a year before it was implemented by you getting all of your foundational pieces and training and things in advance. And then one of the things that you had to do was sort of share your vision with the powers that be so that they would invest in something like this. And I think all of those it's not a quickie, right? So if anybody's listening and is like, oh, but there's so many there are a lot of moving parts, and you stuck to it. You sort of brought it forward. To what impact? What would you say were some of the things that made this worthwhile for you, or that ended up being the return on your investment, both in time, energy, money, and all of the things?
And great question. And it's got two answers. One is, what did it mean to me? We'll put that aside for a moment. What did it mean to the company who was investing, the money? And it did take, I don't think it was a year, but it was pretty darn close to a year to go through an approval process to get the funding for it. And it wasn't hard to convince really seasoned executives that coaching was worthwhile investment. The hard part was, what would it look like, right? And what we did had not been done before, and none of the executives had experienced that. And quite honestly, I have not seen this in any other company or many other companies out there.
Not all the pieces that you have together.
Right. And so the benefit to the company was we saw attrition rates plummet. So attrition rates dramatically improved. So that reduced costs, number one. So that gave us a sense that employee satisfaction was improved. Employee engagement was improved. Because one of the leading causes of people leaving a company was disengagement. They don't feel connected. And so we got huge benefit in terms of retention. And that was a big plus. The second piece was productivity. We saw a huge, beyond what we had predicted, or I shouldn't say predicted, committed to. Because, with any corporation, you got to have a business case, you have to have an ROI and all that stuff. And the return there was phenomenal. The percentage of people that were hitting their quota significantly improved, trending toward best in class, I would say, based on everything that I've gotten in terms of feedback. I think that was just to be able to cite what the improvements were goes back to having to have measurements in place about what you're trying to improve. You need to know where you are. You need to know where you want to go, but then you have to have the measurements in place in order to make sure that you know that you're on track. I think it's easier in sales, in a sales organization, to measure that impact. A little bit less so in some of the back office jobs, if you will, or other parts of a corporation, but they're measurable as well. There are a couple of things that I wish we could have put in place. One of the misses was not starting out with an employee satisfaction survey that was particularly focused on their manager's skill as a coach. I pushed for it, didn't get that, but that was one of the things I think is important for any organization to do in the start, is see where you're at. See where you're at in terms of your employees' view of their immediate coach. So, there are a couple things that I would add to the playbook, if you will, but I thought we did a pretty good job.
I agree. And so some of the things, and we're going to get to in just a second, what it meant for you personally, but I can say from in this particular structure, training over 200 of your leaders, the kinds of things that I heard from the leaders that also were sort of that ROI are things like, I feel empowered for the first time to sort of have a difficult conversation, or how to draw the best out of the people that I work with. I remember in an early on training, a comment such as, I'm leaving all my one-on-ones with my people with a long list of things to do. And then I'm saying, so what's wrong with that picture? And how, whose responsibility is it to get those things done? So really shifting and empowering people to take care of their own responsibilities. But then when we're doing that, the whole team lifts together. Just the excitement that would ripple through a room as you were adding tools to very talented people who had track records of all sorts of success, and yet never really had these particular types of tools taught to them. So just as from a facilitator point of view, seeing that energy and that focus, and as we talked about at the very beginning, making them get together and use the skills during the training. It wasn't, let me throw up all over you for 2 days and then go. No, it was stop and do, stop and do, stop and do. And just that would perpetuate the energy as well.
And I'll say, Meg, when you observe any training session for managers and above, so managers, directors, VPs, and it's a 2-day session, it's an eternity for these guys to be away from the field. And you almost never have their attention for the entire period of time. In this particular case, for 2 solid days, with rare exception, you captured 100% of their time because they viewed this as an investment in their leadership skills. They saw the value to them, and they were engaged and designing the program in a way that forced them to interact.
Right.
Was an important part of it, and that's what you and Rob bought one of the many things you guys brought to the table was that instructional design piece.
Well, I don't know how many times you and I would say to each other, there's no laptops open. Nobody has their phone in their hand. Everybody is completely focused and engaged. And when you, like you said, take these top leaders out of their environment and say, okay, I'm going to give you a couple breaks and you can do things during those breaks. But right now, I need your time, your energy, your focus, and then make it worth their while. It pays off in spades.
Absolutely. Yes.
What about personally? What did this mean for you personally?
So, I think a couple things. One, I did a research paper back in 2010, I think it was, about my experience in I'd mentioned, the whole how do you do transformation, et cetera. And really coming down to, one of the key aspects was you need employee engagement and emotional commitment. So I felt like I finally found out how to do that. And so that in and of itself, kind of a 10-year quest to figure out how do you do that, right? Was my, one of the benefits to me. I think having my immediate employees, who are the mentor coaches, tell me time and time again, or thank me time and time again for the gift I gave them. Who doesn't love that, right?
It just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, and so and I think, the other piece too is, when you spend a career focused on helping others deliver their very best, and helping organizations deliver their very best, when you finally hit a home run or a grand slam, I think in this particular case, it's hugely rewarding. And I have to say that out of everything that I did in my entire career, this was probably the most impactful thing I ever did.
That's so neat. So as we're wrapping up our time, because unfortunately our time flew, if somebody listening is thinking, I really want to change my organization and bring more coaching in. We obviously talked about a lot of things, but I'm just wondering if there's like a cherry on top or anything in particular that you would say, maybe start here.
Yeah, I think, and actually, I don't know how I got this book, but somehow it, whether it was Amazon sending me a suggestion, but Keith Rosen wrote a book, Coaching Salespeople to be Sales Champions. And it's all about how to develop a coaching culture. I really wish either he would have written it earlier or I would have read it earlier, but he's got a whole map of things that you need to have in place. But one of the things that he said is a failure point of any coaching program is to not have a coach the coach element to it. That's really key. So I think to be successful in developing a coaching culture within an organization, number one, you need to really remember people do what their managers talk about. So you got to focus on the managers. And kudos to Scott Santucci for banging me over the head with that one. So the key is to focus your effort on frontline sales or frontline managers. Doesn't matter if they're sales managers or whatever. And to emphasize to those individuals that basically have four jobs. One is a manager, which is delivering, the donuts, if you will. Second is a trainer, because they've got to constantly be training people to do different things, new things, et cetera. Third is a mentor. I mean, most of these people, a lot of what they do is mentoring because, they were experts at what they did. But the fourth element is being a coach. That's an element that you have to instill in people, that is an important and critical part. That's key. You have to have executive sponsorship. If your executives are not talking about this, aren't inquiring, aren't coaching, you won't get the return on investment that you would like. And then having a coach the coach program where you have really certified coaches that are also subject matter experts in terms of what they're coaching to, I think is critically important, because you can't just train people and expect that they're going to change their behavior that has gotten them to where they are, right? Every manager's got a huge ego, and they think that the way they do things is the best way to do it. So you have to have mentors, and having a coach to coach program is key. There's probably a dozen other things, but those are the major ones.
Those are great. I appreciate you taking your time to share this incredible success that you've had and your vision with all of us. You've left corporate America. What are you doing now?
I had to focus on a couple of things myself for the last 8 or 9 months or so. But I'm actually, I've kind of hung out my shingle, right? And I'm doing some coaching, and I'm pretty selective about in terms of who I'm getting engaged with and what I'm doing, and also helping advise people about how to create a coaching culture. And that's probably the most exciting thing, is when I can get an organization that really wants to get there and help them figure out a pathway. it took me 40 years to figure this all out. The least I could do is share some shortcuts to people.
Which you did today. So I thank you for that. It's always a joy to spend time with you. Thanks for joining us today.
Meg, thanks for everything. I really appreciate the time.